Happy Wednesday, y'all. Welcome back to another creative challenge where we are talking about editing portraits in Photoshop. So we've done a couple of great things so far. We talked about dodging and burning. We talked about selective color. And today I'm really excited because we're going to talk about color lookup. I feel like color lookup is one of the most underrated tools in Photoshop. For me, I've seen it when it comes to color grading. So I'm really, really excited to go through that today. Welcome to everybody in the chat. My name is Idara Ekpoh, so I'm going to be your host today. If y'all have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll make sure to get to them. And let's go ahead and get started so that way we don't waste any time today. So we're gonna start with this portrait that I have here. I shot this one back in, was it 2020? It was 2020, right before the pandemic. And so it was one of my personal projects that I did. So I thought, why not spend some time with y'all to go through and edit this image? And we're gonna color grade it only with using LUTs. So I actually have my notes over here, so let me grab them. There we go. Gotta make sure I have my notes ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit of color lookup. And color lookup, I like to think of it as kind of like a preset for a photo. They're also known as LUTs. So if you do any kind of videography or color grading in that sense, there's LUTs that are used for videos. LUTs are also utilized in Photoshop as well. And so I really love them because it's another way for you to color grade your image and see what kind of cool options and vibes that you can get. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can also create your own LUTs. So that's another great process, because if you do any kind of really cool color grading in Photoshop and maybe you want to save that as a LUT for another picture in your project, you can do that as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. We do have this photo for right now. We're gonna keep this on background. I'm not gonna duplicate another layer, but I'm gonna come down here and we're gonna go ahead and come over here and go to adjustment layers, and then we're gonna go ahead and click on color lookup. Perfect. So this is where you're gonna see your properties pull up here. And if you click where it says load 3D LUT, you will see that Photoshop already gives you so many different LUTs to choose from. Now they all are going to do something different to your photo. Even hints, if you look at the name, you'll be able to kind of guess what that might look like for your image. But you can kind of go through the different LUTs to see what that would look like. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click on random LUTs. Don't mind the way it looks on the image. I just want y'all to see how drastic some of these LUTs can be. So we're gonna go ahead and click there. So that's very drastic. Candlelight, so that's usable. Crisp warm is also kind of usable. I really like my images warm, so I really like that one. I also really like this one because there's a lot of blue in these images, so the crisp winter look can do a really great job with the blues. There's drop blues, really, really love this one. I feel like it does well with all of the skin tones in the images, as well as kind of muting the blues if that's the look that I'm going for. Edge amber, fall colors. I also really like this one. Again, it brings out the warmth in the skin of my subjects, and then also kind of adds a little bit of warmth in the background as well. Film stock, Fuji, you have all of these different LUTs that you can essentially choose from. So we're gonna go ahead and do some editing with color LUTs. I am gonna do a little bit of, let's see, the channel mixer I wanna come, no, not channel mixer. I want to just kind of color balance, do a little bit of correction here. So I'm using color balance just to get the tone of the image to where I want it to start. Okay, I think I like that. So I just made some basic adjustments there, just adding a little bit of cyan, adding a tad bit of green and blue to get it from here to here. It's not as red. I don't know if you guys can see the color change on your end. I'll try to zoom in case that is a bit more prominent. Let me see. So her skin was a little bit more red. It's a little bit more on the warmer side now. So hopefully you guys can see what that change looked like. Now I'm gonna go ahead and see, love color looking for composite work. Yes, I love that, composite work. Let's see, color lookup. So I have a list of LUTs that I really liked on this image that I'm gonna go ahead and show y'all what that looked like on this photo. So I'm gonna start with, I really liked the drop blues. And the one thing that I always try to do is while I am putting these specific LUTs on my image, I do love to play around with the opacity, right? I don't want this to essentially be my final image, essentially. So what I'm going to do is lower the opacity a little bit. So I have an opacity of 22. I can even lower the fill and just play around with that. I'm gonna leave the fill where it's at. I'm just gonna work on the opacity. So this is a full opacity, and if I pull that back, it still adds that that LUT to the image, but it's not as powerful and as bold as it was before. Maybe we're gonna increase it a little bit more. So yeah, that's before. That's after. So very subtle. It kind of adds a bit more of like a haze, I feel like, to the image that I really, really like. So now I'm going to come back to adjustment layers. I'm going to click on color lookup again. Like I mentioned yesterday, one thing that I really love to do is do this all on separate layers. And the reason why is because if you make any changes you don't like, you can just delete that adjustment layer. So that's probably the biggest tip that I have is when you're utilizing any of these Photoshop tools more than once, just separate them into separate layers. So then that way you can focus on each specific, color or LUT or whatever you might be doing. And if it doesn't add anything to your photo, or maybe somewhere down the line you want to remove it, you can just turn off the layer, or if you would like, completely delete it. So you have a little bit more flexibility. And if you don't do that, then what I usually find is you're just editing on top of each other over and over and over and over again. And then at a certain point, now if you realize, I don't really like that edit I made 10 steps ago, it's a little bit harder to get back to that and then get back to where you're currently at and get the look of the image that you would like. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and we haven't done anything to this one, right? Yes. So we added, I'm gonna come down here and I'm also going to name my LUTs as I go. So this one is drop blues. Let's see what else we have in here that I really like. No, this is too red. Was it fall colors I liked? Yes, fall colors is another option. Drop that a little bit. So before, after, I like that it kind of brightens up a little bit. So this is fall colors. Come back to my adjustment layers. I'm going to go back to color lookup one more time. Yes, Tim, layers are good. The layers are your best friend. And then also naming your layers is also going to be your best friend. I would personally, that's one thing that I always have to tell people to do. Let's see. And if you want to, maybe you're seeing something and you add a LUT, and maybe the moment you add it, you're like, you know what, this is a lot, but I'm kind of curious to see what this would look like if I were to play around the opacity. So I don't like this LUT, but maybe when I play around the opacity, maybe it might be able to fit a bit more for this image. So I can go ahead and play around with that a little bit. It adds a nice bit of contrast around my subject, but still I feel like it's a little bit too harsh. If I pull back on the fill a little bit, that's the before, that's the after. So actually that's kind of nice. I like the contrast that it's adding to my subject, my main subject's face, as well as the rest of my subjects, and kind of makes them stand out a bit more and makes them look a little bit bolder. And I'm actually gonna pull back a little bit so you guys can see the full picture, so that it's not being blocked by these two tabs here. So there's that before and there's that after. And so I actually really like that. Let me go ahead and put all this in one group so that way we can see what we are doing so far. So this is what we had when we started, and this is what we have now. So let's just keep adding. Why not? So I'm going to come back here to color lookup, and I also wanted to try another one that I really like is Foggy Night, which is a really like dark, gloomy LUT. If I was going for a look like that, I could add this to my image. I'm not going for this, but it takes away all of that kind of brightness that we had and kind of darkens it up. So I'm going to delete that one because I don't want it. I'm going to call this one Fuji. Remember, always name your layers. Okay, great. I think I'm actually satisfied with the way that this looks so far. So again, this is the before, this is the after. And actually, I think I had one more LUT I wanted to show y'all that I really liked. I also liked, have I used Late Sunsets yet? I've not. So Late Sunset is also a great one. I don't think I'll use it on this one. And then I used Fall Colors already. But again, if I wanted to pull back and see what it would do, it adds a little bit of that purple tint to the photo. I don't want that on this image, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. And I'm satisfied with what I have right here. I think I'm gonna come down to this Fall Colors layer and reduce the opacity a little bit because it's a bit too warm for my liking. And that to me looks a lot better. So if I show y'all, that's that before, that's that after with just, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4 adjustment layers, 4 color lookups. So maybe you're wondering that you want to save this specific combination that you made and use it on other images. So oftentimes when I am shooting, I'm not just shooting this one photo. I probably have a couple of photos that fall into this specific project. So if that's the case, you can export your LUT and then be able to import it when you're editing other photos, or maybe for some reason, let's say you export it and then, I don't know, your computer crashed and it didn't save your settings. If you had that LUT saved, you can go ahead and add it back onto this image as well. So for just for the example purpose, I'm going to export this LUT and I'm going to add it back onto this image. So that way you guys can see what that looks like as well. Let's see. What blend is it? So that's actually a really good, another good point. I'm not even getting into blends today. So another thing that you could do, you can change the blend mode. Everything is on normal right now. But if I wanted to, that's actually a really good question. If I wanted to change the blend mode, I could do that. So if you all see over here where it says normal, you'll have darken, multiply, which is actually really kind of nice. What's another? Lighten, if you want to actually like lighten. Screen, let's see, color dodge, linear dodge, and you can kind of play around with the different blend modes. So that's another way to take it a step further. Instead of just adding the LUTs and then walking away, you can add a different blend mode. So these are all on normal, but if I wanted to, let's see. Multiply is nice, but it's kind of too dark for this image. You go to soft light and then this down a bit more. So you could change the blend mode in that sense. So if you all wanted to play around with that and play around with different blend modes to see what that would look like on your image as well, that could be another option. So as we've done that, you can see how it's changed from what we had before to what we have now. So that's before and that's after. And I actually really like this as well. So that's another great tip, is that you can also not only add the LUTs to your image, but then also play with the different blend modes. So then that way you can see what different options you can have for your edit. So we have that before, we have that after, and now I'm gonna go ahead and export this and go to layer, new layer from background. Cool. So where you're gonna do file, you're gonna do export, color lookup tables. Oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that background. Okay. File, export, and then color lookup tables. And then you're gonna have this box show up. And so in this box, you can go ahead and name your color lookup if you want to put any copyright. The quality, I usually leave it on high. And then if you want to use this LUT in Photoshop, I leave it on cube. That way I can just import it into Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and call this LUT 1 example. Okay. And I'm gonna save that to my downloads. Great. So just for this example, I'm gonna go ahead and delete what I did, so that way I can show y'all how you can also import this LUT. So on our same background, I'm gonna come here to adjustment layer, color lookup, and then load 3D LUT. And if I go to my downloads, it's sitting right here, and then bam, that's the LUT that we just created. So again, if I was editing multiple photos in this specific set, I could just do that, save the color LUT, and then add it to every single photo that was in the set to keep that cohesive look. So I really love that because it's quick and easy to create your own kind of LUTs / presets, whatever you want to call them, and then keep them in a shared folder, or excuse me, keep them in a saved folder, so that way you can reference them as you're editing. Now, another great way to do this is if we are editing, for example, through selective color. Like we talked a lot about selective color yesterday, so I wanted to incorporate that into this lesson today to talk a little bit about how can you color grade with other tools and still save them as LUTs. So you don't have to just use LUTs to be able to save them and then reuse them as LUTs, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to come down to adjustment layers and just quickly go over selective color. We did talk a lot about this yesterday, so if y'all want to reference the lesson from yesterday, please do so. It's on Behance, it's on YouTube. It is also on my Behance page, so that way you guys can go over and reference everything that we talked about more into specific details. But I'm just gonna come in here and make some edits to this image, starting with the reds, because as we said yesterday, reds are usually what impact the skin. And then I'm going to create a new layer. Let's go into yellows and see what that does to our image. She's too red there. Okay, let me come down. Okay, I like that. And really, this is just me playing a game of just sliding back and forth and seeing what this does to my image. I really like to add the blacks because it adds a bit more of a contrast to those yellows. So that's that slight before and after there. Then we're going to come back, selective color, cyans. We do have some cyans and blues in here, so I want to see what that does to the image. I love blue. That is probably one of my favorite colors. And so we're gonna go ahead and play with that. I like to keep things blues or make it more of that, like, would you guys call this, I mean, I guess cyans, but like, it's like a teal kind of color. Yeah, so play around with that, and I'm gonna darken it a little bit so it stands out. I really like this strip and how it's wrapping around her, so I want it to be a little bit more bold. That's that before and after. Then we're gonna come back here, selective color again, and I have a lot of whites in this image, so I kind of want to see what I can do with my whites to help this image add a little bit more style to this image. And I really like to add white, play around with my whites, because I feel like it adds more of a vintage kind of look to my image as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and play around with these sliders to see what that will do. I'm pulling this more on the white side. I'll remove the blacks. And that's that before and after. So it kind of makes this section over here pop a bit more. And let me see if there's anything else I want to add. Let's go to blacks. See what colors we want to add to our blacks. And sometimes, again, I play around with these. And when I'm editing with the blacks, I do like to pull back, because I really don't need 100% opacity or fill when it comes to adding blacks or adding color into the black / shadows of my image. Let's see if there's any questions. No, we are good so far. I'm gonna bring this, yeah, lovely. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and group everything together. That's that before, and that's that after. And I'm gonna compare what we did with selective color and creating a LUT, and then compare it to the first original LUT that we made as well. Let's see, what else do we have in here? I don't think there's much blues. It's the blue right here, which is kind of distracting. Let's see, can I do something? I wish that was the same shade. Okay, let me see if I can make it more of the same shade. a blue compared to, yeah, there we go. So that way it doesn't, it's a little bit more muted than, so if you look right here, hopefully you guys can see my cursor, but if you look down here where it's kind of blue next to this first subject's arm, you'll see this kind of deeper blue tone in the shirt that she was wearing, the girl behind her was wearing. I want to mute that a little bit because it's a bit too much for me. So that was what it looked like before, and that's what it looks like now. So that way it kind of blends it a bit more with the girl that's two subjects back in the teal, and then also the rest of the teal in the image as well. So that is our before and after. Now what I want to do is I want to export this as a LUT. So the same thing we did before, we're going to go to File. We're going to go to Export, and then I believe I can still do color lookup tables. Let me see. LUT 2. And hi, cube, save that. I'm gonna save it to my downloads. I think I saved it as iLUT. Okay, I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna come here to adjustment layers, color lookup, low LUT, go into my downloads, and then there it is. The same LUT that we just created is sitting right there for us. And I created this LUT with utilizing selective color. So if you want to play around with your color grading, maybe you're utilizing hue and saturation or other adjustment layers that are going to impact the toning of your image, the color of your image, you can save those into LUTs, so then that way you can repurpose them for other images. This is really great because it's going to save you time ultimately. You don't want to, I'm a huge advocate of saving time if need be. And so if you are editing, again, multiple photos in a specific set, or maybe you find that the specific edits that you're doing to this photo can be really great for another set of images when you do edit them, you can save these LUTs, so then that way you can utilize them for future references. So that's the first one we made. I'm going to go ahead and also load the LUT that we made earlier, this first one. So that was the first one that we made. And then we go back to color lookup, load 3D LUT. This is the second one. So which one do y'all prefer? Let me know in the chat. So this was the first one that, hold on, which one was the first one? Yes, I believe this was the first one that we created. Let me see. Hopefully I'm gonna give it a moment to let it sit and simmer. And then this is the second LUT that we created. So this one was made utilizing the actual LUTs that were given to us by Photoshop, and just playing around with the blend modes. We played around with the opacity, and just, I think we added about 4 or 5 different LUTs, and you can do whatever you really want. You have the freedom to do whatever you please. And then this was the LUT that we made with just focusing on selective color like we talked about yesterday. So I really, really love the selective color one. I don't know what it is. The way that their skin looks is really, really beautiful. And then you could also combine the two. Maybe I wanted to start doing selective color in the beginning, or in the beginning of this specific photo, I also talked about a little bit about color balance. I just wanted to color correct some of the colors I had. You could do that and utilize things interchangeably, utilize color lookup, utilize selective color, or any of these other adjustment layers for your toning, save them as a LUT, and then that way you have that to reference for later. So this is my option. I'm going to go ahead and export this for my future use, and hopefully when I utilize the edit the rest of the photos, I'll be able to utilize that. So I'm seeing 2. Yep. I like 2. I'm glad we're all on the same page. I think this is the final image for today and the final edit. So hope that you guys really enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm looking to the right now, just because I'm looking to that chat, and to see if you guys have any other questions or comments. And like we also, I really like the note that was made about blend modes. That's another great way to really take your editing a step further, seeing what kind of different looks, edits you can get if you change the blend mode on your image. I really like my favorite blend modes are usually lighten, sometimes screen, depending on the image, overlay depending on the image, soft light, but you can also do that for future reference as well. Awesome. Let me see if there's any more comments. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and export this image because I'm going to utilize it later. So we're going to do export as. JPEG. I'm gonna bring this to high quality, export, and then save that to my documents. And beautiful. Awesome. So if y'all have any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to me on Behance. Let's see. Have you looked at the projects we posted? I'm going to do that today. So if you guys have any projects that you've posted so far, I'm going to come in and chat with y'all today, look at the projects you posted. Please be sure to do that. Play around with these images. I've given you guys all of the images from the first 3 days. These are some of the special photos from my project. So I really hope that y'all enjoy the raw images. Play around with them. Go crazy with your edits. I would love to see what y'all come up with. And I will see y'all tomorrow. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, go to my website, send me an email, or hit me up on Behance. But until then, I will see y'all tomorrow.